How do you set out your goals and actually achieve them? Now, of course, I'm going based off past experience and what I do now. And I've learned obviously many different things, and I've changed the way I set out my goals and so on and so forth. But the way I set out my goals now, and I am extremely confident that it's the best goal setting method as of now for myself anyway. But I'm confident, of course, it would work for you. Very simple. Keep it very simple. You don't want to overcomplicate goal setting. Two things. First thing, you want to break it down into smaller steps. I'm sure you've heard of this, absolutely, and it works. That's why a lot of people talk about it. You've heard it a lot because it actually works. You want to break down your goal into smaller steps, little W's or small wins is what people call it nowadays. Let's say, think of an example. Let's say your weekly paycheck is $500. You get $500 a week, and your goal for the week is to save $400. What you can do is break this down into smaller, more achievable steps. Thing is, of course, I've heard this before as well. People don't specify how many steps. As many as it takes. As many steps as it takes in order for yourself, your conscious and your subconscious mind to go, okay, yep, this is attainable. To make it go from a goal that seems unrealistic to a goal that now sounds actually achievable. So let's say you want to save $400 out of a $500 paycheck for the week. What I would do, and again, you don't have to follow this specifically, and of course this isn't just for money, saving money, this is for any goal. But what I would do in this situation, just trying to think, maybe you would write out, and it doesn't have to be a step-by-step like tutorial. You can just write things in sort of step-by-step format. Let's say the first thing you write is your guaranteed expenses, or things that you know are going to go out of your account in that week, regardless of how hard you try to save your money. I'm talking fuel, I'm talking groceries, maybe you've got some weekly subscriptions, although most things are monthly nowadays, but some things are weekly subscriptions. And maybe you like to treat yourself or take out your partner or a family member or a friend, whatever it may be. And that's something that's non-negotiable for the week as well. Let's say altogether, $80. Now, it's, for fuel, groceries, and treating yourself, $80 is quite cheap, of course, but it's an example. Okay, let's say guaranteed money that's going to go out regardless of how hard you try to save your money, $80. So now you've broken it down to make it seem at least more clear to you, okay? Okay, now I know no matter how hard I try, I'm aiming for $420 saved for the week. Okay, well, I'm actually trying to save $400, so sweet. Now I'm $20 over my target. Okay, well, you try and go throughout the week without spending any more than that. You're going to want to treat yourself, maybe go out or buy some clothes or whatever, right? Okay, instead of going out on the weekend, I'm going to stay inside. I'm going to stay inside and watch a movie. Or instead of going out for Friday night dinner, because I usually go out twice a week for dinner, I'm going to stay inside and home cook a meal. Something like that, okay? So now you're breaking it down into smaller steps to make it's still attainable, but to make a goal sound somewhat achievable to now, okay, yeah, I can definitely do this. I've used this analogy before. It's like making a cookie. You never get given a cookie dough mix or a cookie mix. Mind blank. A cookie mix, okay? And that's it. You just get the ingredients and that's it. You're like, oh, well, what do I do? Do I just chuck it in the oven? No, you get given a step-by-step process, right? Imagine you were given a cookie mix box, right? Unless you're a baker or a chef or somebody who has made cookies before, you're not going to have a clue. You're going to go, how the hell am I supposed to do this? But now you look on the side of the box and there's step-by-step broken down instructions and you go, and then guess what? You made a cookie. You made some cookies that you never thought you could have made just because there's now a step-by-step process. It's broken down into achievable chunks. That's how I set out my goals. Now, I usually do two things, and that was the first thing, step by step. And the second thing, I kind of was just talking about it, but you've got to make them, you've got to make the goals somewhat achievable, somewhat more realistic than you think. And I hope you know me by now. If you're new to the channel or new to the podcast, new to me, welcome. Thank you very much for tuning in, of course. But if you have watched my content before and or you know me, I really do hope that you understand by now that I'm all for setting your goals just so incredibly high it seems unrealistic, but it is. It's achievable, right? I've used the saying before, shoot for the moon. If you don't make it, you'll at least land amongst the stars. But I'm talking crazy goals that will, I want to go into a bit of science into this, but I'll just give an example. Let's say, your goal is, I'm going to make $1 billion in 6 months, let alone a year, right? Well, I want to make it very extreme. To you, that might, well, to other people, that sounds ridiculous, of course, but even achievable goals sound ridiculous to small-minded, unmotivated people, of course. But me saying out loud to myself, I'm going to make $1 billion in 6 months, my conscious mind, my outer body is going, yeah, that's achievable, because I'm speaking it. It's those words are coming out of me externally. Your subconscious mind, which is far more powerful than your conscious mind, by the way, it knows that's not achievable. Your subconscious mind is going, nah, it knows that's not happening. If your subconscious mind doesn't believe you, it's not going to happen. Now, you may be thinking, well, how do I know what's achievable and what's not? You know what's achievable. Even if the best spot to be in is something that seems achievable, but not at the same time. Like, I want to make $1 million in a year. It's like, especially if you've never made over 100 grand in a year, that's very difficult. That is something very difficult to do. But is it impossible? No. Is it far more achievable than $1 billion in 6 months or even a year? Absolutely. You're in that sort of zone of that's going to be very, very difficult to attain. Very difficult. Is it even achievable? I mean, I think it is, but, I just got to work really hard. You never mentioned there that it wasn't achievable. You know that it is. It just requires hard work. So I hope you understand what I mean by that. Like, you need to set somewhat realistic goals. And trust me, your mind and your body will definitely know the difference between something that's unrealistic and something that is realistic, but just very difficult to attain. How do I actually go about achieving these goals? You've heard it a lot, especially from myself. But again, I'm a big believer in, if something's cliche or if something is said a lot or spoken about, over and over and over again, there's obviously a reason for that. And I'm going to give a very cliche sort of, or I've heard this before, answer, because it's so true and it works. Your motivation is going to dissipate. Your motivation is going to go out the window. It requires discipline, relentlessness, perspicacity. You've probably heard that from Andrew Tate, but it's a great word. And another one. I'm just saying these two because Andrew Tate. Indefatigability. But in all seriousness, it requires discipline because your motivation is going to go out the window. It is. You've got to be relentless. You've got to be ignorant of those people who tell you otherwise. You're not going to make it. That's unrealistic. You've got to get shut the fuck up. I'm not listening to you. And you've got to be consistent. I say that a lot. Have to be consistent. Without consistency, everything else goes out the window. Everything else goes out the window. And you've also got to be patient. You've got to acquire the attribute of patience. And I talked about this quite a bit, a fair chunk of the last episode of this podcast. If you haven't listened to it, go listen to it. And a fair chunk of it was about patience. And I used the analogy of watering a plant. And then eventually you see, it's barely even growing. It's not even moving. And then you stop giving it what it needs. It's going to die. It's not going to grow. So with consistency and patience, along with all of the necessities, the things that it needs, the things that it requires, that's where that plant grows and blossoms.